the Hum Audio LAAL, an honest gear review. Now, I've owned the LAAL for around, I reckon it's probably been about a year now, maybe a bit more. We first heard one, I got one in to test out and I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. So we got another one. We ordered two in and I think we ended up keeping the actual one that came down as a demo. So we got two, and we have one in this studio. We have another one in Studio A. And the honest answer to what a lot of people ask me is it worth £9,000? I think they're £8,800, which is a lot of money to spend on a limiter. And is it worth it? Now, to answer that question, is it worth it? It is worth it to me, hence why I bought two. It's highly beneficial to me. But to a producer, to someone who's not making huge amounts of money out of mastering, it's not worth it. But to me, to a business, to a company, to a studio that is doing well, is very, very beneficial. And there's reasons why. It will give you that little extra 5%. And people might think 5%, well, I'm not paying £9,000 for 5% of a better sound. But if you're someone like myself who's constantly looking for the best sound, constantly buying new equipment to gain a better sound, it's highly worthwhile, because those little 5% add up over multiple pieces of equipment. And the LAAL, the best way to explain it is it's a look ahead analog limiter, hence the name LAAL. And unlike what I've got here, the Better Maker Limiter 2, you can hear that limiter. When you're using it, you hear it limiting. You can audibly, very audibly hear that it's limiting. You'll often use the LAAL and you'll not notice it. You'll not notice that it's limiting. It's very transparent, and it's not going to affect the overall sound too much in the way that you're squashing dynamics. It's not doing that. And you can hit it hard and it'll apply limiting, but you're not hearing that limiting. And that's the main key thing here. And people will say to me, and they have said to me in the past, well, who would pay £9,000 and you can't even hear it limiting? You don't want to hear it limiting. The best limiters you don't hear, but they are limiting. Like if you look at it on frequencies, if you look at dynamics, you look at the waveform, you can see what it's doing. You can visually see that there is limiting being applied. And what a lot of people have said is, well, what some people have done is they've bought one of these thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to replace my digital limiter. It's one more thing I can do out the box and do in the analog domain and gain this better sound without having to go back in the box and do limiting in the box, which, the majority of people are applying limiting once back in the box. You still will have to come back in the box and use a limiter in the box to set your true peak. This isn't going to set your true peak, but what it is going to do is it's going to, let's say for argument's sake, you're using FabFilter L2 as your limiter. The difference between the LAAL being on and it being off, the digital limiter has to work so much harder. This is taking care of a lot of the transients when you're limiting the track, so that once you get in the box, once you're using your digital limiter, it's not working as hard. You're doing all your lovely clean limiting in the analog domain whilst doing the digital limiting using something like FabFilter Pro Q L2. You're using that very soft, very subtle. It's just catching peaks and setting a true peak. It's not actually doing the brunt of that limiting. You will know yourself, if you haven't used one, you will know the effect of hitting any limiter in the box hard. You will know exactly how that sounds. It doesn't sound pleasing. If you're a mastering engineer and you've had a request to get up to -3 LUFS, which I don't recommend, but you do get these requests every now and then. If you've ever had to do that, you will hear how detrimental it is to the actual sound. You'll notice a decline in quality by limiting the dynamics that much. What the LAAL is able to do is apply that limiting so that when you're doing your limiting in the box, it hasn't got to work as hard. It's working 10 times better than how a digital limiter works. And that's the key. And that's the key thing with it. But also as well is that's what actually makes the LAAL worth its weight in gold. Regardless of whether it costs 9 grand or costs 20 grand, it's worth it from my perspective of whatever it cost, because of how much benefit it has in the mastering chain. Look, I wouldn't, if I could achieve what I could achieve using the LAAL with something like L2, I wouldn't spend 9 grand on getting one. I especially wouldn't spend 9 grand on putting another one into Studio A. So it's a highly beneficial tool to have, and it does, and I stand by this, it does set you apart from someone who hasn't got one. That's one thing it does do, because you can achieve a louder master whilst retaining a lot of the dynamics. There's also as well, there's a few really good features with it. One of them is the fact that you can turn the transformers on and off. I tend to like them turned off, and that's mainly because I've got other transformers in the chain that I prefer to use. And that's not because the transformers on that, I think they're Lundale transformers that are in the LAAL. But the fact that you can turn them off and on is good, because sometimes you'll want them on, sometimes you'll want them off. Being given the option to have them on and off is good. The use cases for it are, it will work with pretty much every track you work with. The one thing you'll find is you'll run into it, and you may find that it kind of crunches up a little bit, causes some distortion on certain tracks. On some tracks you may get that, but what's good about that is when that's more about subtle tracks, tracks that are, you know, they would distort anyways. Any limiter would pretty much distort them. There's certain tracks that do that. This isn't there. There's no exception with the LAAL. The LAAL still has certain tracks that do distort, and it will be like 1 in 100 tracks you work on, but that does happen sometimes. But all you do is you just don't hit it as hard. It's a case of if you're limiting it hard and it's distorting, dial back. You can pull back, and you don't have to limit as much. You can then, once you're in the box, do some limiting additionally. But there are tracks that it doesn't work as well on. The one good thing about the LAAL is it has a lovely box tone. When you pass into it, you get this warm, I hate using the word warm, but it is a warm, pleasing sound. There's a lovely box tone that it, just by passing through it without any limiting, you are gaining a sound from it. So often when I'm mixing, for instance, I'll mix into this, but I won't hit the limiter. I won't necessarily be limiting hard. I'll maybe flick into it, and that's just to catch any peaks. But generally speaking, I'm just passing through it for that box tone, the sound of the actual box. That's a very, very beneficial thing to apply to a mix, because it does give it this instantly pleasing sound. The other good thing that's on it is the widener. Now, wideners are cool in the limiter end because they're at the end of your chain. It's just a case of, with the widener, get to the end of the chain, you're applying your limiting, and then it's like, can I add some more width? Yes, I can, or no, I can't. You can switch it off, you can turn it on. There's lots of cool features with it, but these are the main ones. And Yeah, the honest opinion on it is it's very, very expensive. And many people will, if they listen to an audio example on it, they would go, I can't hear 9 grand's worth of difference. And yes, you won't hear 9 grand's worth of difference, but what you will hear is the difference it makes to what your digital limiter has to do, which ultimately means it doesn't have to work as hard. And that's where I find it hugely beneficial. So yeah, that's my honest opinion on the Hum Audio LAAL.